Alright, welcome back to part 3. Again, continuing on with my little tour of my studio workshop here. The top of this large rack here, like I said, it's mostly paints and supplies. The top shelf, I have a couple of little figures here. I have some Zartans and some ninjas. The top shelf here, I have a couple of different things. Here's another VCD figure that I started working on a while ago. Jango Fett. Never really got a chance to finish him. Here's some stormtroopers and some motorcycles. Motorcycles are actually for my dreadnoks. As you can see here, I've got some more another Zartan, some dreadnoks, Buzzer, whatever the other guys' names are, I can't really remember. Then I have a couple of figures that I created. Here you can see this one is just a generic ninja guy holding the greatest martial arts weapon ever created, flying guillotine. Scratch built flying guillotine. Here's a G.I. Joe Kamakura that I made. Sand Trooper. In the back we have a Crocmaster. Alright, that takes care of that. Then we go to the second shelf. These are some dyes used in casting. You mix up your resin when you're going to make a cast. You put a little dye into it and you can turn the resin into, any color you need to get. You want to get black, you want to get red, you want to get blue. You can turn it just about any color. This is a clear resin that I have up here. Next I have a little supply of glues. This is the glue accelerator that I was saying before, the zip kicker. You can put that on pieces before you apply glue, and it will help the glue to adhere quicker. Or you can do what I like to do, and that's glue your piece together, and then I'll take a little Q-tip, dip it in there, and then rub the Q-tip on the outside of the piece. And as soon as the accelerator hits the glue that's in the joint, it immediately causes it to harden, to cure. This is some Mr. Dissolved putty, and what that is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's a liquid putty that you can brush onto a figure or a piece that you need to putty a line, putty a gap, instead of using some of your Fix-It or some of your Super Sculpey. You can use Mr. Dissolved putty. It'll go in there, and it's a liquid, so it'll flow into the grooves or into the gaps, and it'll do that. Here's some silver pigment that I like to use to mix in with some black paint to get a nice metallic black look. You could use any color paint. I mean, I prefer to do it with black, so you get like a metallic black. Kind of like what I did here on my Iron Man. If you can see it. I'm not sure it's really going to pick it up. But it gives it a nice like metallic black look. Gives it a little bit of a metallic luster without being a gloss, I guess is the best way I can describe it. Like I said, there's some Fix-It. Fix-It's just about the greatest thing known to man. If you're going to do any kind of sculpting. Here's some paints. Some Freak Flex paints by Badger. Pretty thin, mostly used for airbrushing, but you can brush them on too. I mean, I've done it. Super Sculpey. Don't really use that too much anymore, now that I've learned about Fix-It. Now we come to the paint shelves, and I say shelves because I've got more paint than any human being ever would need and will ever use. Top shelf here, I've got some Reaper paints. Reaper paints were formulated basically for use on miniatures, like little plastic Warhammer or Dungeons & Dragons type of miniatures. That's what they're made for, it's what they're intended for. Personally, I think it's probably the best paint on the market. I really like the consistency of it. It gives a nice coverage. I don't have to thin it down. I don't have to do 17 coats to get something to cover. And one of the better things about the Reaper paints is they sell, I mean, you can buy a single bottle, or you can buy what Reaper calls a triad. And what a triad is basically, if you look here, I believe this is a triad. The grass green, the jade green, and the leaf green is one of the green triads. And what that does is it gives you a medium green, a dark green, and a light green. So you can base coat a figure or an item with the medium green. You can take the dark green and you can add some water to it to make a nice wash. You put the wash over the top. It goes in all the crevices and the grooves and gives you a nice shadow. and then you take the lighter green and you dry brush it over the top of that to get some nice highlighting. So it kind of takes a little bit of the guesswork out of what color should I use for highlighting and what color should I use for wash. Instead of just using a plain black wash on everything or a gray wash on everything, you can make your own washes using some of the Reaper paints. One of the best skin tone selections, in my opinion, again, you know, they have about 4 different skin tones, which means you get the highlight color and the shadow color along with the regular skin color, so you end up with about 10 to 12 different skin tone colors, which is, I mean, you're going to find something that you can use with that many skin tone colors without having to mix something on your own. Next up, I have some paints from Citadel Games Workshop. Again, paint formulated for miniature usage. Games Workshop is the creator of the Warhammer games, and these paints were basically intended to paint the miniatures for that game. Again, my second favorite brand of paint to use for painting, you know, figures and doing the customizing that I do. Great coverage. I usually end up thinning them out a little bit because the Games Workshop paint seems to be a little thicker than most paints. Little customizer trick, you put a little bit of clear Windex in there, a couple drops of clear Windex in the paint pots, helps improve the flow of the paint and thins it out without really thinning the color. You're just thinning the consistency. It's much better than putting water in there. I used to put water in the paints, and then I learned about a little trick from somebody else. They told me to use clear Windex, and it's the best thing ever. Up in front here, you can see there's another, it's a Citadel Foundation paint. These paints supposedly have more pigment, and they're great for base coating. I've used them for base coating. They do work great. I mean, you know, take that for what you will. Next up, I have some Vallejo Model Color and Vallejo Game Color. Again, Vallejo is a brand that I think was intended for use on a lot of like military stuff, vinyl kits, miniatures, stuff like that. Some more Games Workshop. I believe those are the washes and the inks. Then you come down here, there's some Tamiya paints. Tamiya is big with the military model kits, airplanes, warships, stuff like that. I mean, a lot of the colors that I have for the Tamiya paints, I have like Japanese Army gray and Japanese Navy green and stuff like that. I don't really use the Tamiya paints too much because I think they're a little bit too thin, which is not really a bad thing because the thinner the better usually, but they're a little bit too thin in my opinion. Tamiya clear paints, however, are great, and the metallic paints are great. Best way to get a metallic look to your paint job is to paint something with Tamiya metallic silver right there, and then go over it with a clear paint, clear yellow, clear red, clear blue, and you get a nice metal look to your figure. There's some Citadel washes there. Those are basically, you know, already watered down paints, and just slap them on there as washes. Then I have some basing. There's some sand, some volcanic sand, which is black sand. You can see some shrubberies. And then there's some more stuff down here, some hot glue, some plastic cups that I use for mixing resins and you know, rubber for molding and casting. There's the molding and casting supplies. The Smooth On Umu is my favorite rubber at the moment for casting with. There's a nice dewback that I started working on about 3 years ago and haven't had a chance to finish yet. Some more random, you know, the hair dryer is good if you want to speed up the paint drying or you want to heat something if you're going to take a figure apart. Have a nice pot there for if I need to boil some water or some dye. More toolboxes just filled with parts and supplies and paints. More supplies and paints. Like I said, throw nothing away. That's going to bring me to the end of part 3. Because once again, we're approaching the 10-minute mark. I don't want YouTube to kick my video out. So I'm going to end part 3 here. And I hope that you will join me for part 4, which will hopefully be the last part of my little tour, because I'm just about done. So hope you come back for part 4. See ya.